My topic is traumatic hot orbit. So I'll be very quick because other distinguished speakers are in line waiting and we have got very little time. So I bring you, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, so I bring you warm regards from RIO Kolkata. So what are the basically causes of orbital inflammation after trauma? It may be a blunt trauma, it may be a penetrating trauma, or it may be iatrogenic trauma. In developed countries, we have got more incidence of the infection spreading from the sinuses into the orbit. But in countries like us, we have a very huge chunk of people who have got post-traumatic orbital inflammation. Now, let us first talk about our problem, that is the iatrogenic causes of trauma. After injection, peribulbar injection, anesthetic injection, posterior subtenon, post-orbitotomies. But more important causes of orbital inflammation are glaucoma drainage devices, scleral buckle, post-enucleation with ball implant, and keratoprosthesis, which frequently get infected and result in orbital inflammation. The basic causes of the post-surgical orbital inflammation is inadvertent orbital wall injury. Inoculation, it is doubtful, but still if you're not maintaining a preoperative sepsis, inoculation of periorbital skin flora, inoculation from infected instruments, and obviously from infected implants. Now, the second important thing is the foreign invasion, that is post-traumatic foreign body in the orbit. There are two kinds of foreign body. One is the vegetative, of which the wooden foreign body is an important culprit. And the second is the metallic foreign body. Wooden foreign bodies, the problem with wooden foreign bodies is that initially it is on CT, it is misdiagnosed as air, as Dr. Chandana Chakraborty had shown a case. And after a few months, it appears, the foreign body appears like the surrounding orbital tissues. So MRI is helpful. And another thing that we have to remember that metallic objects are inert, except if it is iron, copper, or lead. Now, this is a case where it appeared, if you can see the neuroimaging, it appeared like a air pocket, but let us see what came out. When we explored, there was no entry wound, and this is what it came out from the wound, a huge wooden structure. Now, next that I will discuss is the lethal killer, that is a post-traumatic keratodermatous fistula. We just get into the thing that post-traumatic keratodermatous fistula makes a communication between the ICA, there's internal cerebral artery, and the cavernous sinus. It is an acute in onset and mostly requires intervention rather than the idiopathic or the spontaneous keratodermatous fistula, which behaves in a chronic way, and usually conservative treatment is done. The problem with traumatic keratodermatous fistula is it progresses very fast. So there is an abnormal communication between an artery and a venous sinus. So there is high pressure black flow into the veins of the orbit, and that causes a venous congestion and fluid cannot come out, getting into a compartment syndrome-like situation. And on the other hand, the retinal artery pressure reduces, and that causes retinal ischemia and very fast dimness of vision. So neuroimaging is the key. In MRI, you will see the dilatation of veins, enlargements of the surrounding vascular structures, and dilatation of the cavernous sinus, which will have due to the high flow of blood. But the main important thing, as is in this case, is the digital subtraction angiography. I would like to emphasize on the fact that digital subtraction angiography is not only helpful in confirming the diagnosis, but also planning. The most important intervention, the treatment, is an endovascular embolization. The endovascular embolization is also being effectively done through the DSA report. So the last thing that I will discuss is the retrobulbar hemorrhage. Retrobulbar hemorrhage may be iatrogenic or it may be traumatic. Retrobulbar hemorrhage is usually, it causes a compartment-like syndrome inside the eye. The conservatively treated, if the conservative treatment fails, this is where I want to emphasize, because all of us, all ophthalmic surgeons, whether exposed to orbit or not, can perform a lateral canthotomy incision. And In cases where the retrobulbar hemorrhage is progressing and conservative treatment is not being helpful and there is decreased vision and proptosis, in those cases, lateral canthotomy is useful. The one tip that I will put for lateral canthotomy is before cutting the lateral canthal tendon, please crush it with the artery forceps. That will give you a bloodless field. So the wisdom gained, that is my last slide, is that traumatic orbital inflammation is not always infective. This is what we have to keep in mind. A thorough search of orbital foreign bodies, even in absence of a discernible entry wound, is a wise decision. All orbital foreign bodies do not require immediate removal. Vegetative foreign bodies, iron, copper, lead, these kind of foreign bodies, and foreign bodies which are producing symptoms, progressive symptoms that are not being controlled. And before taking out of a foreign body, comprehensive preoperative planning with the help of the neuroimaging is the key. Lateral canthotomy incision can reduce intraorbital pressure in retrobulbar hemorrhage and can save the vision. And the last thing that I would say, that traumatic keratocavernous fistula is most commonly mistaken as thyroid orbitopathy. So even in a patient with known thyroid orbitopathy, if there is a history of trauma, please do a neuroimaging. A wise man never burns his hand. So let us deal our traumatic hot orbits wisely.